Yeah, no, dude, I hear you, but I think a Maxxis Assegai is still the best tire ever. We can talk about this more later. I think as mountain bikers, one of our favorite topics to debate is tire choice. Tires are one of the few components on a bike that can be optimized to fit specific conditions or terrain, and they are a wearable item, requiring riders to periodically survey the tire landscape. And with the inevitable search for new, fresh rubber in all of our futures, most of us have pretty strong opinions about which brand, compound, or model is superior. But what we found is the majority of the time when we talk about how a tire performs, we're referring to how it feels when mounted on our front tire. Of course, rear tire performance is important, and the combination of your front and rear tire will create a unique on-trail characteristic. But there is no denying that how your front tire responds to the trail dictates how fast or hard you can comfortably ride your bike. So with a bunch of brands releasing new tires in the last few years, we figured what better way to test some new models and get people talking than with a front tire comparison test. So today, we have 8 tires, and we are going to compare how they perform when mounted up front. For this test, we are focusing on tires aimed at all mountain or enduro riding that are designed to excel in dry, loose over hard packed, and rocky terrain. We approached each brand detailing our testing conditions and the type of bikes we are riding, and let them provide the tire model they feel best suited our needs. To test how each tire performs, we are going to focus on 3 performance factors: cornering traction, with a focus on predictability and side knob support; tread performance, with a focus on consistency and overall grip; and sidewall support, focusing on tire flex in high energy situations and tire deflection. Each tire will receive a score out of 10 for how it performs in each section, plus an average overall score. We are also using control wheels, a set of Crankbrothers Synthesis E29 carbon wheels, as well as the same tire pressure, the same amount of orange seal sealant, and a control rear tire, a Maxxis DHR II. To help put each tire through its paces and gain a well-rounded impression of each, I've got fellow Vital editors Johnny Simonetti and Tanner Stevens here to join in on the fun.
You told me that they were good, and I'm still...
That's all I like to hear.
This is Tanner Stevens here. Yeah, big fan of the High Roller 2.
Is that your favorite front tire?
Yeah, highly debated topic here. No, dude, the High Roller 2 is sick. It's got a nice little drift zone on it, and then you lean it in, and it just hooks. So,
What do you look for in a good front tire?
traction on the side knobs when you're leaned over. Dude, I feel like someone else should describe my riding style.
I'm gonna say your riding style's fairly loose. Like you're in control, but you have a lot of body English. Like you're pretty loose over the bike, and you're like neutral forward.
Yeah, I would say that's right. Yeah, riding style looks like I'm gonna crash a lot. Honestly, I'm excited to ride the WTB, the Vigi. Yeah, dude. Team NorCal's been hyping it up, so we're gonna have to check out the Vigi. I don't know how she's gonna run in the SoCal conditions here. Go-to tire pressure is, we're about 25, 26 front, and around 27, 28 rear.
Johnny, what's your favorite front tire ever?
Probably Maxxis Assegai.
It seems too easy to answer.
That's the truth. Kind of like the transition knobs, I like it to not just like fall to the side knob. I like it to have like traction all the way through the like radius of it. Probably the Pirelli. Like, I don't know. It's just
Race car.
Yeah. Just F1. See if we can get some F1 speed in the turns out there. Barely. No, I don't know.
Goes one more.
I don't know. I think it's pretty smooth. Like, I try to avoid a lot of stuff and kind of ride more over the front of the bike. Just because I'm taller, I kind of like to tower over it. Is that for front or rear or both?
Give me both.
40.
Did you just say 40?
Probably 29
Is that what it's going to be today?
in the rear. 27 in the front.
I would say a Schwalbe Magic Mary, because when I raced downhill bikes, that tire was good on just about everything, so I didn't have to buy a whole lot of tires. What makes a good front tire? Kind of same as Johnny. I like when there's consistency as you lean over, so those transition knobs a lot of tires have nowadays is pretty key. And yeah, just I don't like when tires roll when you really put energy and lean into them. I like the sidewall to hold up to some force. Man, honestly, they're all pretty sick. I think probably the V, just because it seems like the one that I might be like the most hesitant to try, or I know like the least about, which makes me excited to see how it's gonna perform. Riding style in one sentence: asleep at the wheel, hanging off the back. I'm very rearward. I'm like the opposite of Johnny. Even though I'm tall, I just stand upright and let the bike do its thing. 25 front, 27 rear, which is what I've been running for like 5 years now.
All right, so this massive rain rut, we're not going to sing that.
Oh, yeah.
Don't do that.
You might be wondering, what makes a good front tire? And what were we looking for when analyzing each performance factor? We define cornering traction as a tire's ability to bite into the ground and provide predictable traction at various lean angles. Being able to trust your front tire to hold the line through a turn or anticipate when it will no longer provide traction can greatly affect how confidently you can push your bike. The section of trail used to test cornering traction featured various types of corners, including tight and steep berms, long flat turns, and tricky banked berms. The mix of turns highlighted how each tire responded to different amounts of rider input and how well the side knob design and compound conformed to the loose, hardpack terrain. For tread performance, we focused on how well each tire gripped the ground and responded to typical trail features, such as braking bumps, loose rocks, awkward corners, and off-cambers. A well-performing front tire should make it easy to control your front wheel and maintain a line. We looked at each tire's rubber compound, knob shape, siping, and knob spacing, as they all play a factor in dictating how a tire molds and responds to the ground. The section used for testing offered a variety of unsupported corners, square edge bumps, harsh impacts, and aggressive braking. Sidewall support comes down to the casing construction of a tire. A good front tire should be able to navigate a rock garden without deflecting or transferring too much force into your hands while remaining puncture resistant with adequate rim protection. We set out to see how each tire responded in high-energy situations, such as rock impacts or pumping through steep berms. All tires tested used gravity-focused, multi-layer casings, and many featured some type of sidewall or bead insert for added support and protection. Alrighty, kicking things off with our impressions of Continental's Kryptotal FR. The Kryptotal FR is Continental's only front-specific model designed to excel in mixed terrain by balancing stability, grip, cornering support, and rolling resistance. The tread design features medium-depth blocked knobs spaced tightly together, slightly ramped center knobs, and closed siping throughout. Continental offers the Kryptotal FR in 3 casing and 3 compound options. We tested the burliest DH casing and stickiest super soft compound in a 2.4-inch width. The DH casing uses 4 carcass layers in the sidewall, 6 under the tread, and an apex layer for added pinch flat protection. While this is a lot of layers compared to the other tires, Continental uses thinner 110 TPI fabric to maintain a low overall weight. Lastly, the super soft compound uses a harder base compound for each knob with an ultra grippy rubber on top. With the fastly growing popularity of Continental tires, we were all eager to see if the Kryptotal would live up to the hype.
For the Continental Kryptotal, I scored it a 7.7 overall, and I did that because it kind of made me, I didn't have to think about riding when I was riding that tire. The casing was really strong. It was a downhill casing, so it had a really solid feel, but it also had a heavy feel while riding. And I think that kind of heavier feel in that casing led it to want to stray off trail if you weren't giving a lot of rider input.
So the Continental Kryptotal FR for me was probably the stiffest tire out of the test, which makes sense because it uses a downhill casing, but that stiffness didn't mean that it deflected too much, or for me it wasn't like an uncomfortable tire to ride. I struggled the most with that tire to get it to hold a line through corners. It seemed like once I got it on the side knobs, it took a lot of energy and force to engage those knobs into the ground. I gave it a 7.8 because overall the tread pattern seemed like it was super solid. It had consistent grip everywhere. It was just that forced me to ride at a hard, aggressive mentality to engage the tire and keep it on edge in turns.
For the Continental Kryptotal, I scored it at 8.1 for the cornering performance. I thought it did the best in the flat turns. For tread performance, I thought it felt really consistent, but for sidewall support, it was maybe a bit much for our trail bikes and kind of gave a lot of feedback in the hands.
Next up, Michelin's Wild AM2 is an aggressive all-mountain enduro tire for mixed to soft terrain. The tread design features tall, blocked knobs, staggered side lugs that point inward, and minimal siping throughout. The goal of this layout was to reduce rolling resistance while maintaining cornering grip and support. The Wild AM2 is available in 4 casings and 6 compound options. We tested Michelin's second most durable Gravity Shield casing with the Gum X compound and a 2.4-inch width. The Gravity Shield casing is aimed at enduro riding and uses 3 60 TPI and 3 33 TPI casing layers. The Gum X compound lands in the middle of Michelin's compound options and offers a mix of rolling efficiency and grip. Sporting some tall and deep side knobs that scream to be ridden hard, anticipation was high to see what the Wild would offer.
Next up was the Michelin Wild AM2, and I gave it a 8.3. For cornering performance, I felt like the firmer knobs benefited me, having a more forward riding position on the bike. For tread performance, I thought it was pretty consistent, and I liked it a lot in the rocks where it felt like it held a line really well. I didn't notice any pushing or tucking the wheel in the flat turns either.
So yeah, the Michelin Wild AM2 scored a 7.3, had good cornering traction, had a sharp side knob, which I tend to like. It's kind of like more flatter tread pattern, not as radial. It had a strong casing. That was the biggest thing that I noticed from it. Strong casing, sharp side knobs, and it kind of held traction really well when you pushed into the trail and you gave it a lot of rider input. It wanted to be pushed, this tire. It wasn't really like you couldn't be hesitant with your cornering. You like had to really dig in.
Oh, I gave the Michelin Wild AM2 a 7.2, which was the lowest score out of the group for me. And that was mainly due to the large knobs and like the blocked shape of them. It felt like they weren't quite engaging the loose over hardpack terrain that we tested on. Overall, the tire offered enough grip and traction to still ride and have fun on, but I think it needs some looser, deeper soil to really excel. The sidewall support I thought was really good on that tire. In the rocks and stuff, it held up great. It never deflected off a line. It was easy to ride hard and aggressive and trust that it was gonna go where I wanted. Well, it wouldn't be much of a front tire test without including Greg Menard's signature Maxxis Assegai. Featuring one of the most popular and copied tread designs in recent years, the tire pulls aspects from multiple Maxxis models to offer riders exceptional grip and support across the entire tire profile. The center knobs are heavily ramped and fairly shallow to increase rolling speed. A prominent transition knob adds support and feel when leaning over, and the side lugs are deep and squared off to increase cornering bite. We tested the Enduro-focused double-down casing and stickiest, lowest rebounding 3C max grip compound in a 2.4-inch width. Double Down uses 2 lightweight 120 TPI layers combined with a butyl sidewall insert, making it lighter and more compliant than the DH casing. Maxxis' 3C Max Grip compound combines 3 rubber compounds in key areas: an ultra-soft rubber at the top of the knobs, a medium rubber in the core, and hard compound at the base of the tread. The Assegai arguably sets the benchmark for front tire performance, and I think we were all excited to compare its performance against the rest of the tires in the group.
Next up was the Maxxis Assegai, which I picked as my favorite front tire before we started the test. It scored an 8 for me on what we rode. The cornering performance, the knobs are super grippy. Through compressions, I kind of felt them wiggle a bit. And overall tread performance was really consistent. I felt like having a more radial design, it was pretty easy to feel traction kind of everywhere. Yeah, while it had a lot of traction, it was kind of hard to hold on to through, a variety of stuff we tested.
The Maxxis Assegai was a very homey feeling tire. I think we all kind of know that tire the most. It comes on a lot of bikes. Kind of overall with like the tread performance, it scored the highest in that category for me. And I scored it as a solid 7. It was just kind of good everywhere, but it wasn't great. It was more of a radial design. You kind of have consistency throughout the tread. And then it wanted to kind of make you push a little bit more, but then when you pushed, you kind of lost that feeling of where the edge was. And that for me, I wasn't really that confident in. I didn't like how I didn't know where the traction was gonna break. The casing on this tire, it was a double down, but it felt like it was softer than all of the other tires in the test, especially riding through the rocks. Through the rocks, it felt like it wasn't rebounding as much, and it was almost packing, and it kind of felt like it was slowing down through the rocks, which was a strange sensation coming off of some of the other tires.
Maxxis Assegai, which I would argue is probably the benchmark for front tires these days, scored well for me. I gave it an 8, and to me that was the most user-friendly tire. It was really familiar. It was easy to get on and responded predictable. It also felt like the double down casing we rode was a little bit more compliant than most of the other tires. I didn't really have any issues with it not holding up in like really compressing into berms or feeling like it was too soft in the rock garden we tested on, but it also made the tire really comfortable. It also made it feel a little bit dead. Like it was just kind of always glued to the ground, which was great in a lot of situations, and then sometimes it just kind of felt like it's maybe lacking the responsiveness that some of the other tires provided. I think overall, as most riders know, that's a super solid tire for kind of any sort of terrain you're going to be riding. Maybe not mud riding, but it's obviously not what we tested in yesterday. Up next, WTB's Vigilante. The Vigilante is WTB's premier aggressive tire. The tread pattern features square lug center knobs spaced relatively far apart with minimal ramp. All knobs are deep to dig into loose soil, and the side knobs are staggered to offer consistent cornering traction. The side knobs also have enclosed sipes to improve durability and cornering support while remaining flexible to conform to the ground. The Vigilante is available in 2 casings and 3 compound options. We tested the most protective tough casing and softest high grip compound in a 2.4-inch width. The casing uses 2 B2B layers to offer optimal sidewall support and puncture protection. The high grip compound offers soft yet supportive knobs that rebound slowly to provide maximum traction. All Vigilante models use WTB's Tritech compound construction that places 3 rubber compounds in specific areas of the tire. Similar to Maxxis' 3C compound, Tritech places the highest durometer rubber at the foundation of the knobs to provide support. A medium durometer makes up the middle of the knobs for durability, and finally the softest compound is used on the surface of the side knobs for traction. With its deep lugs that looked better suited for loose soil or mud, we were all wondering how the Vigilante would feel once we placed its knobs on our dry, loose terrain. So I gave the Vigilante a 8.25 because that tire to me kind of mirrors the Schwalbe Magic Mary, which is a tire I've liked so much in the past, and it just offered a ton of grip in kind of all the conditions we rode in. I think looking at it and looking at how tall the knobs are and kind of blocked they are in shape, I was concerned they might not engage with the ground as much or maybe have a tendency to skate on top, but I always felt like I was riding in the tread design. The tread design doesn't have like a super defined transition knob, but I never noticed there being any inconsistencies or vague feeling like leaning over in corners. Once I was leaned on the side knobs, it felt like they had a lot of give, but didn't roll as much as maybe the side knobs on the Magic Mary. They were firm enough to hold up, but had enough siping and were pliable enough to really find grip in those looser turns.
Then we had the WTB Vigilante, which I scored a 7.3. For cornering performance, it did surprisingly well for the terrain we were riding, where I feel like it's not really what it's made for, but I felt like the knobs were pretty firm, but because they were so spaced out, they kind of wiggled a bit over varied terrain. And for sidewall support, it was supple enough to kind of hold on to, but had enough to where it didn't feel like the casing was wiggling a lot, but it felt like maybe the knobs were, just because, yeah, they were so separated.
The WTB Vigilante, kind of was interested in trying this tire from the beginning. I'd never ridden them, seen people ride them. It's kind of been around for a long time. And I scored it as a 5.3 overall, mainly because in the cornering section, it kind of didn't perform how I was hoping. So the side knobs, they seemed to roll a little bit, and it made me like push in the flat turns, and I was kind of scared a little bit with that tire. It has a big gap between the knobs, like a lot of spacing on the knobs, and I think that's good and bad. I'd like to try it on something more like Santa Cruz dirt, steep trails, but for our test we were kind of dry, loose over hard, and I don't think it was the right conditions for this tire. The casing felt good on it. Didn't really do anything out of the ordinary. It felt like it wanted to hold a line, but it was a little timid over rocks. It didn't really have the best traction on like flat surface rocks. It did surprise me where the tread seemed to flatten out more on the trail than I was expecting. I was kind of expecting to sit on those center knobs and have this like skatey feeling. But yeah, it kind of surprised me there. But the cornering, I was hoping for a bit more.
Up next, the Magic Mary has long been Schwalbe's most popular gravity model that performs well in just about any condition. It uses an open tread design with tall, stud-like knobs that dig into topsoil. The center knobs are squared off with minimal ramp, and a transition knob is used every 4th row. The shoulder knobs have double sipes, providing a high degree of flex and grip while cornering. Schwalbe offers the Magic Mary in 7 casings and 5 compound options. We tested the Trail or Enduro Focus Super Trail casing that balances weight and durability. It uses 3 carcass layers under the tread, 2 on the sidewalls, and a bead-to-bead snakeskin fabric on the top. There is also an apex layer for sidewall protection and a foldable Kevlar bead. We paired the Super Trail casing with the Attic Soft compound, the second softest compound Schwalbe offers. There's little info out there about how Schwalbe concocts its compounds, but the Attic Soft offers excellent grip with a tad more longevity than their Attic's Ultra Soft. A tire I know all too well from years racing downhill. I was excited to see what Johnny and Tanner would think of the Magic Mary and how the tire would feel under a smaller travel bike.
So for the Schwalbe Magic Mary, I've ridden this tire in the past and kind of always liked it. It scored a 7.7, is pretty high up there for me. I think it was just consistent throughout. It had good traction throughout the tread, and I think maybe since I've ridden it a little bit more, I was familiar with it, kind of knew where the edge of the traction was. And just overall throughout the tread, it was a good feel. Kind of homey, comfortable feel. You knew what it was going to do. It wasn't going to kind of like skirt out on you or fold knobs.
Then we had the Schwalbe Magic Mary, which I scored a 7.8. I had never ridden this tire before, but heard a lot about it and felt like for cornering, it was really good. Had a lot of traction pretty much at any point of the tread that you were leaning on. Sidewall support, it wasn't the most, but wasn't the least either. It was just kind of in the middle. Did surprisingly well for what we were riding also.
So I gave the Magic Mary a 7.7, and that is my favorite front tire I've ridden over the years. I also knew from growing up riding where we tested the tires that it's definitely not its strong suit, the like loose over hardpack conditions, and it offered a lot of grip and traction, especially in like the kind of banked corners where or long corners or flat corners where you're really settling into a lean angle. Awesome grip and traction, a lot of control. I started to not like how that tire felt in more of the high energy bermed corners where you're putting a lot of force through the front tire. I think those side knobs are just too soft and there's too much siping on them. It started to make the tire feel like it was rolling in those cases. It was really the only tire that I had that sensation of starting to kind of push the front wheel. The Super Trail casing also felt a little bit lighter to me. It felt good in the rock garden that we tested on. It had good damping, a lot of compliance. It didn't feel like it beat me up. I didn't feel like I was blowing through the tire and running the risk of hitting my rim. But I think in those, hard-packed berms, the tire just didn't hold up to, aggressive riding quite as well as the other tires. Moving on to Pirelli's Scorpion Enduro M. Pirelli defines their models by terrain, and the Enduro M is designed for mixed terrain. The tire features consistently spaced, large knobs that grow in depth as you move outward. The shoulder knobs are positioned in an alternating pattern and have a single, deep sipe. And there is also a transition knob next to every other center knob pair to lessen dead space in the tread. The Scorpion is only offered in Pirelli's Smart Grip gravity compound, and riders can choose between their hard wall or pro wall casing. Smart Grip is Pirelli's softest compound that's formulated to balance grip, tear resistance, and stability. We tested the hard wall casing, intended for trail and enduro riding, and features bead-to-bead protection plus an insert of hard rubber above the bead to prevent pinch flats. Developed and proven over the past few seasons by top racers, we had high expectations for the Scorpion coming into the test.
The Pirelli Scorpion scored a 6.7. This was an interesting tire. It was a bit different than everything else in the test. The side knobs are offset, which I was interested in trying. I don't typically ride tires with a side knob that's offset. It was really good in the rocks. I wanted to grab. It felt like it had a heavy feel. It wanted to grab at the ground. When you're on the side knobs, it kind of had a wavering feel through corners that you're fully engaging the side knobs, and I think it was because of the offset side knobs. You kind of wanted to go side to side a little bit to try and find traction. But for me, I'm more of a side knob guy, so it wasn't it.
I gave the Scorpion a 7.7, mostly because it was a little underwhelming, because I was really excited to ride the tire originally, but it kind of just performed well everywhere, but didn't have any standout characteristic to me. It offered really good traction in flatter or longer corners. It was easy to settle into a lean angle. It felt like the knobs, for the most part, were providing good grip and traction. The problem I had is that when I would really go to lean into a bermed corner, the transition from the center knobs to the shoulder knobs just felt a little inconsistent and vague. It seemed like it took a lot of force and energy to get those larger shoulder knobs to engage with the ground. And even though there is a transition knob sort of in there, I never felt super comfortable pushing that tire like I did some of the other ones.
Then we had the Pirelli Scorpion, which scored a 6.8 for me, which this was the tire I was most excited to ride, and it's the only tire that kind of tucked in the flat turns up top. The offset of the side knobs kind of created an inconsistent feeling because they're quite spaced out. Berm corners we rode, it was great. You could really lean into it. But on the flatter turns, it was really hard to tell what it was going to do. Sidewall support was really good, but the kind of inconsistency of the tread made it hard to hold a line.
Up next, the Attack HPL is one of Vee's latest gravity models. Standing for hard, pack, and loose, the tire is intended for mixed conditions. The tread design uses ramped, medium-depth center knobs evenly spaced apart with deeper shoulder knobs set in parallel. Closed siping is used throughout, and alternating side knobs have an additional inset step to increase leaning traction. The Attack HPL comes in 3 compound and casing options. We tested the mid-weight GXE core casing and grippiest full 40 compound in a 2.6-inch width. The Enduro Focus casing uses a 1.5 ply construction with an apex insert and chafer in the bead to save weight without diminishing protection. Derived from Vee's Motorsports division, the full 40 compound uses an ultra-tacky 40A rubber with excellent slow rebound characteristics. The Attack HPL was definitely the outlier in this test. None of us had ever ridden Vee tires before, but we were stoked to spin some laps and form an opinion about one of their newest tires.
The Vee Attack HPL. This one I was interested in trying. I've heard a lot of things about Vee tires in the last year or two, and it kind of, it lived up to it. It was a good tire. It scored well for me. It scored at an 8, which was pretty high for me, and it had great cornering traction, had a kind of a consistent feel throughout, and I think it scored better than the Assegai. It was very similar in tread pattern, but scored better because of the casing. The casing seemed to not fold as much and kind of held up a bit better in the rocks, but I did notice I didn't really like big hits. It was really compliant on the smaller chatter and kind of had a good feel over small chatter and wanted to hold traction. But when you had a big hit, it seemed to kind of fold with that big hit and then deflect a little bit.
So the Vee Attack HPL was my favorite tire out of the test. I gave it a 9.2 out of 10. And for me, that was the tire that the second I got on it, I felt immediately comfortable. I think the standout characteristic of the Attack that I liked was how well it locked into corners and just held an angle all the way through a turn. It does have a more rounded tire profile, which generally I lean towards your more kind of squared off designs that have a distinct drop off in traction when you're leaning over. For whatever reason on the Attack, I just felt comfortable the further I would lean on that tire. It did, at some point start to lose traction, but it never felt surprising or inconsistent. It was very predictable knowing how hard I could push that tire. Yeah, overall, I just think that's a tire that has a ton of grip in the knobs. They're super pliable and can, in the conditions we tested, that it's pretty tough to find a tire that can grab onto loose over hardpack terrain. It really excelled in that. And then just the tread design itself never really seemed to have an end to the traction it could provide. And then kind of topping it off with a sidewall construction that, held up to as hard as I could push the tire.
All right, the Vee Attack HPL scored an 8.6. This tire also has a pretty radial tread design and a lot of transition knobs between the center and corner ones. For cornering, it had a supportive casing, but the side knobs are a bit soft for me, so felt like it would sort of fade a little bit and squirm a little once you got it really on the side knobs. The tread performance though was really consistent. I felt like it had traction everywhere. And then for sidewall support, it had a lot more support than the other radial tires we tested, so I felt like that was super beneficial. Just maybe the cornering knobs themselves were a little soft for how stiff that was for me personally.
Last but not least, the Mazza is Vittoria's mixed terrain focus enduro tire. It uses stepped center knobs with deep siping in the direction of rotation to maximize rolling speed and traction. The side knobs are staggered and utilize close and open siping to increase cornering predictability. The inside of the shoulder knobs have more aggressive sipes to allow for flex, while the outside of the knob uses less siping to provide support. The Mazza is available in 2 casings and 1 compound, and we tested the stiffer Enduro casing with Vittoria's 4C compound. The Enduro casing uses 2 layers of 120 TPI nylon with an added bead insert for pinch flat protection. And as the name suggests, the 4C compound uses 4 compounds throughout the tread. The center and shoulder knobs are made of 2 graphene compounds each. Harder base compounds stabilize and resist folding, while soft and sticky surface compounds increase grip. Another tire that none of us had ever ridden before this test, the Mazza proved to be a love-hate tire for our crew. I gave the Mazza a 7.8, and sort of similar to the Pirelli Scorpion, it was a tire in the group that performed well everywhere that we rode, but it didn't stand out in the group as much as some of the other tires. It offered great traction in the mixed corners we rode it in. It had really good sidewall support and felt like I could really trust pushing it into harsh compressions. Through the rock garden we tested, it performed well. It wasn't a tire that seemed to really have a weakness. Overall, I thought the Mazza performed well across the board, but I think it would fare a lot better riding conditions that is a bit softer and deeper soil. I'd love to ride the tire in those conditions, and I think I'd be able to really feel and maximize the bite that the tread design can provide.
Then we had the Vittoria Mazza, which I scored an 8.8 on. The cornering performance was really good. You got really soft side knobs with a bit of a channel between the center tread and the side knobs, which I'm normally not crazy about, but the different rubber compounds kind of work well, and it didn't have any crazy standout feature in the flat turns, but in the berms it was really supportive, and felt like the harder you pushed it, the more it rewarded you. For tread performance, it was really consistent. Just kind of felt like I knew what it was going to do at all times, and never had any really weird experience. And then for the sidewall support, I felt like this tire had the best mixture of support to compliance to where it's really comfortable to ride, but also you wouldn't blow through it in really hard compressions. So this was the highest scoring tire that I rode.
The Vittoria Mazza. This one scored the highest for me. So We scored it at 8.7. You know, I had the Vittoria vision. I wasn't expecting it, really didn't see it coming, but the Vittoria surprised me a lot. It was exactly what I wanted from a tire, like almost exactly what I wanted from a tire on this conditions, loose over hard and a little bit rocky. It has a nice center knob and then a channel and then big side knobs. But the side knobs have a lot of almost like siping in them where they're super compliant and they give you a lot of feel on those side knobs and you can kind of do whatever you want. It made me feel like I could do whatever I want, and it made me just confident in everything that I did on that tire. It held a line through the rocks. It braked well. It wasn't that radial tread pattern of you're gonna have traction throughout the whole tire, which some people like. Jason wasn't seeing the vision on this one, but we had it over here, so I don't know. It was everything that I wanted out of the test. The vibes are high, flies are flying, the rocks are rocky, and we're testing sidewall support.
All right, well there you have it, 8 front tires tested. It's pretty awesome how many quality tires we have to choose from nowadays. Let us know in the comments which tire you would pick, and make sure to head to vitalmtb.com to read our complete review. Cheers.